Hello, everyone. Welcome. Can you believe it? The one and only Eleanor Goldfield is back.
Actually, I think
better
I
than
am
ever.
the only one.
Are you better than ever?
Whereas there are other Lee camps.
There are other Lee camps. Are there no other Eleanor Goldfields?
Not that I have found in my travels.
Man.
Hello, everyone. I missed you.
I got a soccer player, a priest,
this is starting to sound like the beginning of a joke.
a
soccer player, a priest, and a comedian walk into a bar.
A lawyer who represents people getting their housing rights trampled on in Missouri.
So good people.
Well, he seems like a good person, but I emailed him once and he wouldn't respond. So not so good.
Douche.
Not that great. Anyway, hello, everyone. Kat Negrita has already said she is only here for Eleanor. So...
And I'm only here for you.
We're thinking of selling t-shirts. Just here for Eleanor. We got a big show. I know this is going to shock you. We got a big show for you today. We got a lot of important stories we're going to cover. But just partially because it'll piss off Eleanor and partially because I can't miss something like this. I'm starting off with this. This is not our main story, but I actually tweeted out like immediately after the debate. I tweeted out someone needs to auto-tune "They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs" and make a song out of it. Now, I realized it was not because I tweeted that. It was just millions of people had that same idea. And it is now a trending thing on TikTok of people dancing to this.
Eat the cat. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat.
This is what our world has become.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat. Eat the cat.
Now, does that make our presidential election any weirder, or is it pretty much the same?
I think it's just that now we have TikTok. I think our presidential elections have definitely gotten dumber. They've gotten dumber where, if you look at the lack of literacy
what
rates
is said
in the country
the number of full sentences
the
said at
dumb
debate.
shittery of the nation has increased over time exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just TikTok. I mean, what else are you supposed to? What else do people do on TikTok? I don't actually know.
Well, I wasn't actually commenting on the fact that there's a funny video on TikTok. I was more commenting on the fact that we had a president say, yes, the immigrants are eating your dogs and cats. Oh, and then we had, I don't have it to pull up here. Then we had the formerly presidential candidate on the Democrat side, Marianne Williamson, saying that Haitians do practice voodoo and they do eat your dogs and cats. And it's really elitist of the Democrats to laugh and make fun of Donald Trump, to dump on Trump for saying that immigrants are eating your cats and dogs.
It's a wild world out there, y'all. I will say that this is reminiscent, I think, right around the late 1800s, the early 1900s, there actually was a concerted effort to say that Chinese immigrants were eating cats and dogs because a lot of Chinese immigrants would open restaurants when they came here, and so as a concerted effort to stop them from being at all lucrative, there became this idea that they're going to eat your cats and dogs. So this is actually a tired trope that is the dumb shittery of the nation has increased, but it's kind of also just horseshoed back to where it was in the 1880s, and I think that's kind of interesting from a historical point of view, and not fun from a living through it point of view.
I think even racism needs a new playbook. It's they're just going to the old. That's a great point. It's just going to the old playbook. They're eating your cats and dogs. This actually is not new. Trump is not the first to say that.
He's not the first to say any of the things that he said. Let's be honest. The dude is the least original person.
By the way, quick side note. Anyone out there who is not aware of this, look up the history of our hatred for MSG in Asian food. MSG is essentially salt. It's very little difference from salt. And yet, if you actually look into everyone's fear of MSG and it's going to hurt you and it's dangerous, it all goes back to one doctor, I can't remember if it was in Britain or in the United States, who just felt he was feeling lethargic after he ate Asian food. So he then
probably because he ate too much of it because it's delicious.
So he then said that MSG hurts everybody. And then like article after article just based on this one guy's idiocy, because it was really based in racism. And so they all just jumped in and said, yeah, Asian food is killing us or whatever. So
also, thank you, Robin, for using my phrase butt scooting towards fascism. I appreciate that. That's
thank you, Robin. Let's see. Here it is. Yes. Eleanor has coined many great phrases over the days. But okay, so we got a lot to get to. So let's dive into this. Please click thumbs up, click share. We are heavily suppressed, so it is amazing that any of you even found us here. But you can help by clicking thumbs up, leaving comments, all that good stuff. I am going to start with the latest proof, and really it's 14 separate pieces of proof, but that Israel is targeting, actually going after, not accidentally bombing and shooting aid workers. And this is from, we have multiple articles in this episode from Steven Semler, who does amazing work. He wrote this article for Responsible Statecraft, and he put together, found the data and put together 14 separate, sorry, I started to say 4 and then I added teen, 14 separate.
I mean, that is the word.
Okay. Yeah, but
it is 4 plus teen.
It sounded a bit like I'd never pronounced the word before. 4 to the teen separate incidents where humanitarians were attacked by the IDF after, key here, after giving the IDF or other Israeli authorities their location in order to protect themselves. This, this is like, it's like Fight Club. Rule number 1 is don't give the Israelis your location.
Well,
no, rule number 1, don't talk about being an aid worker.
And we might discuss this a little bit more, but yesterday I went to a really powerful event where a doctor from Maryland, or originally from Pakistan, but who practices in Maryland, had actually gone to Gaza for 10 days and was on the road, the very same road where an hour later, the World Central Kitchen workers were bombed and killed. And when she was saying that when she was in the van, and then you see video, and there's an ambulance in front. It's like a convoy of 50 or so medical people and supplies. And there's the ambulance up front with the lights on. And she said that they did that to make it clear that this is an ambulance.
Or make it worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we are trying to make it clear that we are, because Israel also doesn't allow you to be out after dark. There's a curfew from sundown to sunset. And so if they see anybody on the road, they just massacre them. But of course they might do that anyway. So right. Their rules of engagement are of course just bullshit, and they can do whatever they want. But she said that she had this feeling that we might not make it there alive. And sure enough, an hour later, they just completely wrecked that same road that she had traveled on, where the World Central Kitchen folks were then traveling. And of course, they're aid workers too. So this idea that somehow alerting the Israeli forces to the fact that hey, I'm just trying to help people, but they don't want you to help people. They don't want you to rescue a 6-year-old who's stuck in a car with her dead family. They don't want that to happen. So this remarkably twisted, I wouldn't even necessarily call it news, but this remarkably twisted information is not surprising when you look at what we've seen so far in the past year.
Yeah, and in fact, they're one of the groups that is listed as these 14 incidents of, World Central Kitchen is, of the attacks on aid workers after the aid workers have given their location to the IDF. Of the 378 aid workers killed worldwide since October 7th, more than 75% have been killed in Gaza. So 378 is the total number of aid workers worldwide, and 75% of those are in Gaza that have been killed.
I'm just curious, when they say killed, does it mean they were actually targeted, or does it mean some guy tripped and fell into a manhole? Is it just died, or is it targeted?
Well, I think it's only those who were murdered. So it wouldn't be an aid worker as a heart attack or falls in a hole. But in other circumstances, not in Gaza, there could be, you could get hit by a bullet as a in a crossfire or something.
I was just curious, like, what they meant by killed. So, okay. But this is actually murdered.
Yeah, murdered.
Okay. Thank you.
284 in Gaza and 994 killed elsewhere.
I also love the way that Stephen also does a great job of like not using the passive voice. So Israeli bombardment is the leading cause of death among humanitarians. I think that's like a really important way of phrasing that, right? Because we don't usually phrase things that way, but like literally, this is the leading cause of death. You know, not other war zones, not being being in these like really intense situations where you're subject to disease or famine or thirst, but the Israeli military is the leading cause of death. And I appreciate that he put it that way.
So Israeli attacks on aid organizations have become routine despite systems in place to, quote unquote, avoid humanitarian deaths.
What systems in place?
Like alerting them to where you're going to be, like being in corridors that the IDF has said are safe.
Okay.
But of course, it's the opposite. You alert them, and then some of the time when they choose to, they murder you. So here are the 14. I'm going to try and go through them quickly. November 18th, Israeli forces attacked a convoy of 5 clearly marked Doctors Without Borders vehicles. December 8th, the Israeli Navy fired at facilities affiliated with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, in Rafah with 20-millimeter cannon rounds. UNRWA officials had repeatedly shared the coordinates of the building with Israel. December 16th, an IDF tank fired several rounds at the convent of the Sisters of Mother Teresa, part of the Holy Family Catholic Parish compound in Gaza. December 28th, a convoy of UN aid workers were shot at by Israeli forces in central Gaza as it was returning from delivering aid in the north. The vehicles were clearly marked with UN insignia. And by the way, every one of these stories, I'm sure you saw the roughly week-long coverage on CNN about each of these. That was a joke. January 8th, an Israeli tank fired on a clearly marked Doctors Without Borders shelter in Khan Yunis, housing more than 100 staff and their family, killing a 5-year-old girl. January 18th, an Israeli airstrike struck a residential compound housing staff from the International Rescue Committee and Medical Aid for Palestinians in an Israeli designated safe zone. So they tell these people they'll be safe there. January 31st, Israeli forces bombed the offices of the Belgian Development Agency, completely destroying the building. Handicap International also had offices in the same structure. I mean, isn't this like just some kind of comic book villain, like bombing Handicap International? It's just nuts. February 5th, Israeli ships shelled a clearly marked UNRWA convoy, damaging one of the aid trucks. The convoy was stopped at an Israeli designated holding point when it was shelled. So Israel told them to wait there and then bombs them. February 20th, 2 family members of Doctors Without Borders staff were killed by an Israeli tank. March 9th, an ANIRA employee was killed in his home along with his 6-year-old son, several neighbors. The building was registered with the Israeli military as a sensitive site. April 1st, multiple precision Israeli drone strikes on the World Central Kitchen, which we already discussed. And yeah, those were 3 separate strikes, basically hitting each of the cars.
So the Washington, D.C. based group had coordinated its route with the IDF beforehand. So I think this is also an important thing to highlight, just as well as the recent murder of an American citizen by the Israeli forces. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter whether you're a Washington, D.C. based group, whether you checked with the IDF ahead of time, none of that matters. And people think that, because they're Washington, D.C. based, or because she was a U.S. citizen, the U.S. will care. The U.S. doesn't care. Remember Rachel Corrie?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. This has happened before. Granted, now it's on a different level, but it's like the U.S. has never cared whether their citizens, especially citizens who obviously are anti-Zionist, die at the hands of Israeli forces. There might be some phone call from the State Department like, hey man, could you try maybe not to as much?
Could you bring it down just a little?
Nobody's going to be like, hey, stop the arms shipments because they killed Americans. They don't care.
Yeah. April 9th clearly marked UNICEF aid truck was reportedly hit from Israeli gunfire. The vehicle again was at an Israeli holding point. August 27th, UN World Food Program convoy came under fire near an Israeli checkpoint as the vehicles approached the checkpoint after receiving multiple clearances to proceed. It's important to note this is not just them in their cars gunning it towards a checkpoint and some young Israeli soldier getting nervous. This is them being cleared to proceed and getting shelled. And lastly, August 29th, just a few days ago, an Israeli airstrike on an Anira aid convoy killed 4 Palestinians as it was en route to the Emirati Red Crescent Hospital. The route was coordinated and approved by Israeli authorities. So it's like example after example of these people coordinating their travel with Israel and being targeted. It's just pretty unbelievable and disgusting.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of Israel, let's mention this excellent event that will be happening in Baltimore soon.
Yeah, if y'all are in or around Baltimore, I definitely recommend that you check this out. First of all, Red Emma's is a great and awesome co-op bookstore in Baltimore. But Mohammed Bamier, if you listen to the Project Censored radio show, then you will know that I have interviewed Mohammed Bamier about the no state solution and about what he calls an organic anarchism that stems from Palestinian and regional history and culture. Beautiful, beautiful ideas and really necessary at a time like this. And he also talks about like the revolutionary push against realism and how realism is not the fuel of revolution. And I think like his thoughts and the way that he talks about it is just really, really powerful. And so if you're in and around Baltimore, this is October 15th at 7 p.m. at Red Emma's. And if you're not, I am going to try to record it and make it available after the fact. But of course, there's nothing like being there in the flesh. So please try to make it out to this.
And spread the word. All right, let's go to the story about how U.S. child poverty has tripled over the past few years. Which, by the way, child poverty should not be an expression that any of us have ever heard in one of the richest countries in the world. There should be zero child poverty. When you say it, people should be like, what does that mean?
Right. And I just like to say that we cannot remove this information from the fact that we just gave Israel $24.5 billion to bomb children. These issues are inextricably linked. It is interconnected forms and systems of oppression. And so the fact that, again, this is Stephen Semler, who, again, does great work on this issue. And he just released this a couple of days ago. And this also shows that it doesn't matter who's in the White House. And y'all know if you've hung out with me before, you know that I don't hang with electoralism. Like, that's not my thing. I think that it's essentially just ridiculous. And it's a way to keep us.
I believe the kids, the expression the kids use is fuck with. I don't fuck with electoralism.
Sure. Whatever. But so, and I think that it's a way to keep us, like distracted from the more important things, like the fact that 3 times as many children are now living in poverty in the United States, which these numbers have skyrocketed under a Democrat. Okay. Like, do you want blue fascism or do you want red fascism? Like, what color, what flavor would you like? Mm-hmm. So, and again, like this is inextricably linked to what's happening with regards to the U.S. foreign policy and, of course, domestic policy that funds prisons and not schools and et cetera, et cetera. So the Census Bureau attributes this increase in poverty since 2021 to the expiration of pandemic-era anti-poverty programs. For example, the child tax credit lifted 2.4 million people out of poverty in 2023, but the expanded child tax credit moved 5.3 million people above the poverty line in 2021. The expanded version expired in 2022. Because I guess people aren't poor anymore. So fuck
yeah,
it.
no,
Like
there's zero poverty. People don't know this about America. We got rid of it,
and so Stephen
I'm pretty excited about that.
Stephen has this great graph that also shows like the enhanced coverage that that people might have been able to access during the pandemic. And I say might have because, and I did a lot of research specifically on the eviction ban and found that, for instance, the eviction ban was not a ban at all. It was barely like a stay of execution for most people. There were a few more hoops that you might have to jump through as a landlord, but you could still throw people out on their ass, especially because most people did not have the information necessary to fight back. So a lot of these measures, these anti-poverty measures, were not accessible to people. So even though, like, you know, you had these, a lot of people weren't able to get them, but they've all ended, you know, like the student loan pause. Of course, we've heard about that. The Medicaid expansion, extra food stamp benefits, free school meals, which why the hell wasn't that a thing forever?
Yeah,
like why
forever.
are kids paying for school lunches, you psychos?
Like with almost all this stuff, it's like, why is this not just permanent? Why is it a little like, oh, we're having a rough time in a pandemic, we'll throw you a couple bucks? And could Biden have a program that gets rid of her cough? What is going on with that? Huh, Biden? And apparently it doesn't help when she laughs, so I'm not allowed to make her laugh.
And of course, this, you know, just riffing on the free school thing, the free school meal, a lot of kids go hungry during the summer because there's no school. What the shit is like, that is horrific and should not be the case in the richest country in the world, obviously. So it's like, even these quote unquote, like enhanced coverage measures, not only were they not, accessible to everyone and not enough, but they fucking ended. And so kids are hungry, they're poor, they're experiencing homelessness, which no human should experience, but certainly no child. And this is all at the same time that we're sending billions and billions of dollars to a to facilitate an ongoing genocide. And those two things cannot be delinked. They are inextricably linked because of the fascistic empire that is the United States.
Well said. What was it I highlighted here? Poverty from 2022 to 2023, the number of Americans in poverty increased 5% from 41 million to 43 million. Expressed as a share of the total population, U.S. poverty rate increased from 12.4 to 12.9%, but among children, the poverty rate increased from 12.4 to 13.7, which if you look over the past few years, like it dipped to 5 in 2021. And yet all these idiots in our government who are completely bought off have done everything they can to make sure this did not stay down at 5%.
Yeah.
We want to get that number of children in poverty up a little more.
Yeah.
It really is just nuts. Some comments from you guys. David Nathan says free school breakfast, which is another important program that some states have, but a lot do not have.
Yeah, free food just in general.
Yeah.
Like,
and then in some schools they charge, and then if the kid doesn't pay, they in some areas they will give them the lunch, but then they start like sending bills to the house, and then if that doesn't come in, then they like stamp their report card like failure to pay for lunch. It's like a shame-based idiocy. Katie Kane says school lunches are about $1.25 a meal, but they charge way more than that during the pandemic. All were free.
Yeah, and if you look at, I mean, I believe that the true cost is $1.25, because if you look at the average school lunch in the U.S., that shit looks disgusting. And several years ago, and I doubt it's changed, I did a report that showed that the worst grade, you've got like grade A beef and all that stuff. The worst grade beef goes to prisons and schools.
Oh yeah. No. When I went to public school, there was definitely some lunches that they would crawl a little bit off of your plate, but they weren't like in their prime. They weren't like in their prime, but they were kind of like on their last legs. Like it was like they were on the way out, and you kind of had to like push them back onto the plate. So there was some of that.
I mean, that to me sounds better because at least you can be sure that it was once alive. The things I've seen on school lunch plates look like they came out of some dark Batman lab or something.
We once did a segment on the worst like school lunch photos and stuff that people were posting on Redacted Tonight, and some were like moldy and shit, but one of them had a safety pin in it.
Solid. And meanwhile,
here's the thing, that was on the menu. It said safety pin and pasta.
And meanwhile, they're telling people that they should be worried about razor blades and apples.
I thought this was a good thing to just follow. Just unrelated to the childhood poverty is through the roof in the United States. Zuckerberg just bought a $300 million Russian super yacht.
Is it important that it's Russian?
I mean, just throwing that out there as kids starve in America. Zuckerberg bought a $300 million boat. It's a boat. And it's $330 million, and it comes with an extra boat inside of it.
Well, you need somewhere to park your boat. You got to park your boat in your boat.
You got to park your yacht in your yacht, yeah.
He recently did like this whole speech about climate change and how we have to do more about it. And I'm like,
these things are...
You're in a floating fucking city, you dumbass. Like, how dare you?
These super yachts are like the worst thing in the world for the environment because they're just like, it's all diesel, like... It's just crazy. It's like thousands of dollars an hour of just diesel. But yeah, child poverty, highest has been in years, tripled in the past 3 years. Zuckerberg bought a $300 million yacht.
I really hope there are some whales out there that have gotten this information.
Oh yeah, the orcas. I'm hoping the orcas are going to handle this.
Yeah.
Team Orca.
That would be really great.
And I thought this also was related, that trillions in taxes is dodged by the ultra rich. Now, I will also give you how this is some Democrat bullshit at the same time. But so this is about Senator Ron Wyden is saying we could close the loopholes on the super rich, dodging taxes, and get trillions of dollars, and it'd be enough to fund Social Security. So that's his big pitch. The thing is, yes, that could be true, but we actually have all the money to fund Social Security. Social Security does not need to be unfunded. It's the dumbest thing in the world. The U.S. somehow finds $1 trillion a year for military, but can't find the Social Security money. It is bullshit. The U.S. can print as much as we want. And in fact, we increased the monetary supply by 20% during the pandemic. Most of that funneled to Wall Street. So the idea that you have to find the money to help deal with Social Security is a dumb Democrat bullshit talking point. But that being said, I would be all for. I'd be all for closing the tax loopholes that allow $2 trillion of taxes to be avoided by the richest of the rich.
I mean, there really should not be any millionaires and billionaires. Like they should not exist. As soon as you get to $999,999, guillotine, or after that, you just have to give all of your money away.
100% tax. So over $900 million, 100% tax.
900 million? I'm saying there shouldn't be billionaires or millionaires either.
Oh, or millionaires. But yeah, I thought you were talking about
because you don't need it. Okay. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have access to quote unquote luxury, but luxury is different for everybody, right? Luxury to me is like laying on the couch and reading a book with a nice glass of wine. But like,
you do like a nice glass of wine.
I do.
Let's not deny it.
But I have yet to have $1 million glass of wine. So I think we should all have access to like the finer things in life. And I think there's a lot of psychology as to why we consider things that are restful the finer things, but that's a different tangent for a different day. But Nobody needs $1 million. You don't need $1 million. So you should not be able to make $1 million.
But just to shut up to get the millionaire, the people that do have $10 million, which is a surprising number of people in the United States, just to get them to shut up about this, you could say anyone over 50 million, which is an insane amount of money, is taxed at 100%. And you'd be talking about 0.01% or whatever, the American populace. You'd be talking about a tiny fraction that would actually end up having to pay that 100% tax. Anyway.
Back when the world was a better place, when the world was new and young, there was my grandfather.
Are we talking like 10,000 years ago?
No, my grandfather wasn't that old.
Okay.
My grandfather in Sweden paid a 75% tax rate because he did very well, obviously.
It was like a Volvo exec or something.
And so basically, and he was proud to do it. And he still lived in nice houses and had nice cars. And nobody would ever say that he was struggling, right? Like he came from poverty as a kid. And then so my point is, there are examples out there of how this has worked. And there was a joke, one of the most famous Swedish authors of recent history, Astrid Lindgren, who wrote Pippi Longstocking and all this shit. There was a joke that she had a 101% tax rate because she was so rich. And it was yeah, maybe you should give some of that shit back. And it was now Sweden's going to shit, but that's also a different story. But there are examples of how this works. How you can have now, of course, the next step is to just do it with capitalism altogether. But there are fetters that you can put on an unfettered capitalism to make it less shitty for more people. Right. And that is an example of things that have happened already in places like Scandinavia.
And hear me out on this, though. How about if you make over 50 million, so 50 million in $1, guillotine. What do you think of that?
I'm fine with that. I think the guillotine should be something that we use more often. I think kind of like how every town used to have a square. I think every city should have a guillotine. In the gated neighborhoods, right? So kind of how
just to remind them.
Well, right. There's always police presence in the poor neighborhoods. Yeah. Let's flip that shit. There's a guillotine in every neighborhood where the house costs more than $1 million.
Yep. I think that's right. Let's see. What do I want to go to next? Let's throw a fun one in here. Just why not? And it's kind of good news, but there's been lawsuits in Florida about all the books they've been banning.
Dude. And
they've just won one of the lawsuits, which allows something like 38 books to be back on the shelves, including And Tango Makes Three. This is the book about this is the book about penguins where the Tango, the baby penguin, has two daddies. And they banned this book in Florida. And here's the thing. They said it was depraved or whatever they said. And now, most people do not mention, there is one page that shows a giant throbbing penguin cock. So that could be what they were referring to, but I think it was more that they were gay.
I honestly don't know that they'd have a problem with that. Now, if it was a vulva, they would have a problem with that.
Your grandfather was a vulva executive, wasn't he?
That's cute. But so I actually did an interview with
Tango.
Tango. Tango's adorbs.
Adorbs. He loves his two daddies.
But I did an interview with two folks from the Firestorm Co-op in North Carolina who were doing a great, this really cool project called Bring Banned Books Back. Basically sending banned books back to Florida to people.
Oh, I thought that meant bring back books about Metallica and Guns N' Roses.
Maybe
I totally misread that.
Maybe I'm getting the banned books back. It is, yeah.
So either way.
Could
be Metallica books.
Maybe gay Metallica books. So basically, now I'm just imagining Mitch Hedfield and Kurt just going at it. Anyway, It
why?
approps.
Why did
It
you have
approps,
to?
Lee.
Why did you have to put that image in people's heads? They were already.
You put it in mine.
They were already stuck on the penguin penis, and they had to. All right.
They're getting stuck on a penguin penis. That sounds awkward for everyone involved.
You know, that's how one of those Arctic explorers notoriously went down.
Tango Unchained. That's a good one.
Oh man. I don't. Okay, now you have to leave.
I didn't write it.
Oh, you're reading Phillips.
Don't blame me, but I do love a good pun. Anyway, and they gave me some examples of the books that they were sending back, and they're like children's books. One children's book's about Palestine. No, another book is about two mommies or something like that. And it's like
one of the ones they banned had a black person in the story.
Yeah, that's
unacceptable. In the story.
Yeah, no, it's not okay. So yeah, these are the books. They're not like nobody's like banning like the little anarchist cookbook or some shit. Like these are books about like little animals that have like rainbows or something. Right. It's like they're children's books.
It's basically like books about small animals that are not bigots, and it's very upsetting that they aren't bigots.
Yeah. Oh, I think another one that was banned was a book about children water protectors.
Oh yeah, can't possibly show that. Can't possibly show people standing up and fighting for a future.
Nope.
So anyway, they won at least one of their lawsuits. There are multiple, but they won that one. So now, if you're in whatever county this is, Tallahassee, and you want to read about gay penguins getting it on, now you have the chance.
They don't get it.
I know. I don't think it's about getting it on. I think it's just about being accepting of people in the world.
And penguins.
And being accepting of penguins. So as our child poverty triples. Oh, by the way, before I jump to this next story, please everyone click thumbs up, click share. If anyone wants to throw a super chat in there, I noticed no one has yet, and I understand that you guys don't love us at all. And wait. And perhaps you're upset that Eleanor's back on the show, but still, it'd be.
I know. I'm sorry.
It'd be awesome.
I had nothing else to do, and so I was just like, I'm gonna crash this.
If you're upset that Eleanor's back, then don't donate anything in super chat. But anyway, that'd be awesome, and you can join up also and support the show at leecamp.net or at patreon.com/leecamp. That's patreon.com/leecamp. Okay. The House has passed a $1.6 billion to deliver anti-China propaganda overseas.
Child poverty. What?
Yeah. This is as child poverty triples. I feel like we should just, with everything that our ridiculous government passes, just go, and child poverty tripled. And child poverty tripled. Just remember, child poverty tripled. Just remember there's 17 million empty homes and 1 million homeless people.
Not even. I mean...
Well, they often say like 700,000 homeless people per night, but I think that's a big undercount because they're not counting someone who like was able to lay on a friend's couch for a night or something.
That's a fair point. Housing secure is a totally different.
Housing insecure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Housing secure is a different thing. So like you might be house insecure, which I think should be counted similarly. Anyway, go ahead.
Got it. Since 2016, foreign interference in American elections and civil society has become a Central American political discourse issue. Yeah, mainly.
Unless it's Israel.
Well, yeah, most of it untrue, but still, it's like Russia put up a picture of Bernie Sanders in a banana hammock, and all of us had to vote for Trump after that. But apparently Washington takes a different view when it comes to American propaganda. On Monday, the House passed H.R. 1157, the Countering the PRC Malign Influence Fund.
Dude, hilarious. Don't they already have the Shen Yun, that like huge, the theater performance?
Oh, that's not U.S. government, though.
They help fund it, don't they?
I think it's very rich capitalists help fund it, but I don't think it's the U.S. government.
Oh,
I could be wrong. It's you guys have seen it, all those ads for that says it shows a ballerina. It says
China before communism.
It says art before communism or whatever it was. But anyway, This legislation authorizes more than $1.6 billion for the State Department and USAID. Oh, our old favorite CIA cutout. Over the next 5 years to, among other purposes, subsidize media and civil society sources around the world that counter Chinese malign influence globally, like that balloon they put over us. That's a massive spend of money, about twice, for example, the annual operating expenditure of CNN. So now you've got double a CNN that's just the whole purpose is anti-China propaganda globally. This bill goes beyond that by subsidizing independent media and civil society and other information operations in foreign countries. Indeed, this is already routine, but now they're pumping billions of dollars into it. Crucially, H.R. 1157 doesn't seem to contain any requirement that U.S. government financing to foreign media be made transparent to the citizens of other countries. Big surprise there. And also very important, as you mentioned, that the U.S. seems to have no problem with foreign interference in the United States by our so-called allies, by Israel, which AIPAC bragged about spending $100 million to manipulate our elections this cycle. You also have Cambridge Analytica, a British company. Thank you for the donation. A lucid lunatic. Appreciate you supporting the show. You have Cambridge Analytica that back when they existed bragged about something like 90% of every election they tried to manipulate, they succeeded at. That was a British company with Steve Bannon as a former board member or something.
So I also want to contextualize this historically. I was looking for the name of this because I couldn't remember it. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, the CIA funded project, which funded newspapers, publishing companies, and traveling art exhibitions for decades after World War II in an attempt to undermine communism by promoting America as a place for freedom and tolerance towards new ideas and artistic expression. So, and this was like a remarkably, thank you. This was a remarkably insidious program because they got artists who were not anti-communist. You know, there was even a magazine that featured Gabriel Garcia Marquez, some of his work. And of course, he was an anti-communist. So there's like this very, very insidious way of uplifting artists as a way to counter the communist narrative or like uplift the US as this wonderful beacon of democracy. And so what they do is they'd have like these magazines where they'd have like, you know, one of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's pieces and then like an op-ed about how America's the best and Russia can go F itself. And it's like, I mean, it is very, very smart. So this $1.6 billion is part of a long legacy that the U.S. has had for a long time of propagandizing in other places and other parts of the world for the sake of uplifting U.S. hegemony and going against anything that is perceived by U.S. empire as anti-American. And so what I do find funny in a kind of morbid way about this is that it doesn't work the way that the U.S. wants it to. People in Africa, for instance, the people that I've spoken to are very clear about Russia having done way more for them than the U.S. They want to kick the U.S. out. They want to kick France out. They are willing to work with China on the pursuit of rare earth minerals in a way that is beneficial for the African people and for China, whereas the U.S. just wants to colonize and take advantage of it. And so there is a very clear understanding on the ground in the global South, basically, in Africa and South America, Central America, Asia, the South Pacific. There's a clear understanding on the ground of who the baddies are. And I'm not saying that everybody loves Russia and China. Like, there are complex relationships regardless, but it is very clear that the U.S. is absolutely the biggest baddie, and that the U.S. are the ones who are really interested in a global empire and being kings of the graveyard, whereas Russia and China continuously show that they're not interested in this kind of conquest. they're interested in a sort of capitalistic expansion, sure, just because, global capitalist markets, but they are not interested in the kind of violent hegemony and takeover that the US is.
Great segue. I have proof for you.
Thank you. I teed that up for you perfectly.
You did. BRICS members were just urged to, and this is largely behind closed doors, so this is not really designed to just, lie to the world, but BRICS members were just urged to promote peace, which is the opposite of what the U.S. is doing. The U.S. is constantly going in front of the UN and others and saying why someone needs to be attacked or someone needs to have an economic war against them. At a high-level BRICS gathering on security affairs, Beijing, meaning, the Chinese government, has issued a 4-point proposal urging fellow members to practice peaceful coexistence, build on multilateralism, push for political settlement of crises, and defend justice. These are all the opposite of what the U.S. actually stands for. Wang Yi, a member of the political bureau of the CCP in China, was joined at the meeting by representatives of countries ranging from Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa, Egypt, the UAE, Iran, Ethiopia. Countries should break away from the exceptionalism, which, of course, is what the U.S. uses to justify just about all of its wars of aggression. Exceptionalism and double standards. U.S. double standards are really on display with their whole let's get back to a rules-based world, which basically means the U.S. sets the rules, gets to break all the rules, and other countries need to follow the rules. Double standards, and resolutely reject any words or actions that jeopardize the authority of the UN or deny the binding force of the UN Security Council resolutions.
Which is owned by the US.
Well, largely, but the US can't, because of the way the vetoes work, the US can't do anything through the UN that China or Russia or others or want to veto.
Sure,
so there is a stopgap.
But I meant if it weren't for the U.S., then things would, obviously things would look different in Palestine. But if it weren't for the U.S., just even in as with regards to the UN, things would look a lot different. But I think that this is, this, like you said, this was done, behind closed doors. So it's not just a media ploy, but it's also China has brokered several or tried to broker several peace deals. So it's they're not just doing this for the clicks, y'all. They're doing this because they actually want this. And we could argue
they got all the Palestinian groups to agree to basically work with each other, which had never happened before. That was just recently.
You could argue about they're just doing this for their own sake. It's I don't really give a shit. I don't really care if they're doing this because they know it's good for their economy or because they really are good human beings. Peace is just better. And so I think that it's an important conversation to have with regards to nuance, because I think people who are raised in this very fakaked system of the United States we're stuck in a binary in a lot of ways, but especially when it comes to politics, you're either for the Republicans or you're for the Democrats. You're either for Russia or you're against them. It's no, I'm not. Personally, I hate all nation states, but that's beside the point. The point is that I can look at what Russia and China are doing in certain respects and be yes, thank you, please, more of this. And then I can also look at them in other respects and be don't love that. I think it's important to be able to hold multiple ideas at once and to recognize that when it comes to the US, there's basically no, hey, love that, more of that, please. And recognize that when it comes to other countries, they are actually trying to do more good. And this is, the rise of the multipolar world could not come quickly enough, because the sooner the US empire falls, the better off the rest of the world will be. And we just, as Americans, I think, or as USians, we just have to figure out how we are going to make it over this critical point of the ultimate failure of US empire. How are we going to survive and care for each other?
I think it was beautifully said. I also want to, since we're on the topic of China and the way they relate to other nations, this will just take a second, but even CNN, and this is amazing for CNN to admit this, has admitted that the whole idea of, it's buried deep in an article, but the idea of China is debt trapping all of the African nations has been debunked. Because that's been a propaganda talking point that you've seen put out again and again. Oh, China's tricking all of these African nations into a debt trap. But here is an analysis on CNN that is largely, basically anti-China. I mean, it's not like
they call him a dictator. Or?
It's not vociferously anti-China, but it's kind of anti-China.
Oh, they said the Chinese leader. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a little lighter on the anti-China, but it's not like supportive. Anyway, they're talking about how he made a bunch of promises to the African nation to be fulfilled in the next 3 years, $50 billion in financial support, the creation of 1 million jobs, tens of millions of food and military aid, deepen cooperation with Africa. But here's the key point. And again, buried deep in an article. I don't think CNN loves admitting this, but analysts have largely debunked earlier debt trap claims that Beijing was purposefully seeking to indebt countries in order to gain leverage over their assets as it lent toward the construction of highways, rail lines, and power plants across Africa under Xi's flagship Belt and Road Initiative. So you guys may have heard that propaganda talking point. Oh, China's just putting the debt trap on all of Africa and buying it up. And yet most African leaders have denied that. And guess what? They're allowed to think for themselves. They actually have brains. So it's pretty racist to just be like, oh, China's too smart and they can't figure it out. But on top of that, here you have CNN even admitting that the whole debt trap idea has been debunked. So I think that's pretty important.
Well, and the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Like the way that I understand, having heard from folks who are in Africa and analysts who have spent a lot of time there, basically is that like when the Chinese work with, whether that be people in the DRC or in South Africa or wherever, there is this interest in like, okay, we're going to build roads and we're going to build schools or like a hospital or something like that. Whereas the US is like, just give us all of your shit or we'll kill you. Like that's how the US, like, we'll put a military base here. So you're welcome. And so of course, if you were an African leader, why would you not want to go with that route? And then again, like, as I mentioned, historically, the way that Russia has showed up for and with African nations who are trying to buck colonialism, it's like people aren't idiots. And there is like this very racist idea that like people in Africa can't think for themselves, people in South America. And yet the ironic thing is, of course, as I said, a lot of these people have a way better understanding of imperialism and colonialism than 90% of American citizens.
And one of our viewers who's in Africa agrees with you about that last note. Eleanor's absolutely right about Africa's view of the West. We don't buy Western propaganda. The U.S. routinely passes laws against us. So the $1.6 billion for anti-China propaganda is down the drain. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. And just one more thing from this, the CNN admission that the debt trap is propaganda is a lie. African leaders have also pushed back on the premise while in Beijing, with South Africa's Ramaphosa rejecting the notion that when China invests, it is with an intention of, in the end, ensuring that those countries end up in a debt trap or debt crisis. China is also not seen by observers, this is back to CNN, China is also not seen by observers to be the main cause of African debt distress in most cases, with debt to its lenders making up a comparatively small portion of the continent's overall public debt. So the debt to China is a tiny portion of African debt. And yet our propaganda is, oh my God, they've destroyed Africa.
Which is hilarious coming from the US.
Yes. Yes. Meanwhile, we're like, are there any slave ships still coming? Turn them around.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn them around.
Go around the back.
Go back to California. Go to California. Back door. Okay. Do you think we have? Can we squeeze in this last story?
I did just want to mention a couple of strikes that are happening.
Oh yeah. Let's do that.
I don't have like the video for y'all or anything, but I wanted to mention.
You're fired.
Thank you.
It's been good. Everyone say goodbye to Eleanor.
I wanted to mention 2 strikes that I'm aware
I
of.
can't fire her. She has veto power
I do. Oh, how lovely.
on firings.
I wanted to mention 2 strikes. One is that just today, I believe, or last night, Boeing machinists have launched a massive strike. Some 33,000. I just said 33,000.
Wow, we're having trouble with numbers today. I said 14. So, and you got 33,000.
33,000. Also known as 33,000.
I think 33,000 is actually one of the robots on Star Trek.
Okay, 33,000 machinists are walking off the job demanding better wages and an end to the aerospace giant's wanton violation of safety standards for its own profits. Yeah, doors be flying off. And the machinists are like, we're sick and tired.
Also, they just stranded astronauts in space.
Oh, that little thing. And so machinists are like, this is some bullshit, and we're not taking it. So that's 33,000 of those Boeing machinists are on strike. So let's support them. Also, a friend of the show sent me this because he is a member of AT&T Southeast Workers. 17,000 CWA members who work at AT&T Southeast have been on an unfair labor practice strike now for 3 weeks. And he wanted to let us know that there's a way to donate because the paychecks obviously have stopped because they're on strike. So if you'd like to donate in order to support those striking workers, you can go to action.cwa.org.
Action.cwa.org. And you remember, like, I feel like last year, the mainstream media was giving some coverage to these strikes because it was like, wow, a lot of workers striking across the nation. And then they realized that it was too many and too much coverage. So now you like never hear about it.
Yeah, 100%. Because they don't want people to know that that's a thing that you can do, that you can just, and I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. We can oftentimes feel a lot of helplessness when we go up against something like genocide, because there's not really like, what's the direct action? You know, like a direct action against a pipeline. Okay, well, that's blocking the construction. That's
right.
It's not easy, but it's like an easy
block.
thing to think about.
Yeah, it's tough to block genocide.
But we're over here,
yeah.
And we can't all go over there. So we have to do something that's adjacent. So the idea of a strike, a general strike for Gaza, like this is something that we have the power to do. We have the power to stop work. We have the power to go on strike and say your economy that is fueling this genocide is going to grind to a fucking halt unless you stop. That is power that we have. And I think that we should spend more energy focusing on that than focusing on marches, because no offense, but they don't care. They don't care that you march. They're sitting up there in their ivory towers looking down at you with your little sign and laughing. They don't fucking care.
But my sign was pretty clever.
They laughed at your sign.
It was pretty clever.
They laughed specifically at your sign.
Okay. As long
you shouldn't feel bad
as I
about
got some folks lower down in the Biden administration to get a little chuckle.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be like a Debbie Downer or anything here, or negative Nancy. Why is it always women, by the way? Why can't it be negative Nate? Or
negative Nate?
Or
doesn't have much of a ring to it, does it?
Or Don Downer.
Don Downer.
David Downer. Anyway, I don't want to be a David Downer over here, but it's really important to recognize the things that have power. You know, just like if we're looking at the, you know, in the past, like the underground movements that fought against the Nazis, they were useful when they actually gummed up the works of the machine, not protests. And I'm sorry, but that's the truth. So we should organize around the idea of a general strike for Gaza. Throwing that out there into the ether. Whoop.
Whoop. Do with it as you see fit. Do with it as you see fit.
4 o'clock. Ding, 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 ding.
Yes. Now don't scoot.
But I missed my scoot.
I know. You love to scoot. Eleanor's got to run. So unfortunately, if you wanted more coughing on the mic, you're going to have to get it quick. But I'm going to stick around and do an extra segment, maybe answer some of your questions. So just give us like 20 seconds and I will keep going. So
we'll be right back.
We'll be right back. Hang in there. All right. Let's answer some. Let's look at some of your comments real quick, and then I'll get back to another one, at least one more story. Let's see. Robert says, I only support Boeing workers who want to permanently boycott this warmongering enterprise. Yeah, it's a fair point. It's like supporting Boeing workers is a weird feel to it right now. I will say that. I hope you guys get everything you want. You should be paid fairly, but also stop fucking working there. Don't be at the place you should be fairly paid at. Don't leave, but get paid better and more breaks or whatever it is you're fighting for. Less sexual harassment, but also don't be there. Yeah, that's a now that I've kind of game planned it, that's a confusing protest to have. I totally agree on that one. Let's see. Mecha Marxist says, we used to enforce colonial rule abroad exclusively with force. After the Second World War, we slowly shifted to using debt to control the imperial periphery. Absolutely true. And I wish I could remember who it was. Let's see if I can find them real quick. Someone was giving reading recommendations earlier in the comment thread, and I'd like to shout out their name, but unfortunately I can't find them. Sorry. Whoever it was. There it is. Paco Ray-Ban Robin was giving some reading and watching recommendations. And speaking of Debt Trap, they recommended you watch, although I didn't even know it was a movie, Confessions of an Economic Hitman with John Perkins. It's also an excellent book. It's an easy read. It's one of the things that helped me wake up to the reality of our situation, the reality of our world, and how the United States works. It's one of the books that helped me wake up, and that was way back, 2000, early 2000s or something when it first came out. And but it is how the U.S. destroys nations. He does talk about some assassinations, but he's mainly talking about doing it with economic efforts, economic sanctions, pressuring nations into debt traps, which is what we're accusing China wrongly of. And it really is a powerful book and helped me understand. And it reads like a spy thriller, honestly. It reads like James Bond, which is pretty nice. Let's see what else we got. Metapolitics says we definitely need more strikes, more peaceful protests, more organization, more than ever before. Eric the Red says the union leadership seems to be against the workers. I haven't really followed. I mean, that seems to happen with a lot of unions. I have not followed the details of these strikes to see whether their leadership is against the workers, but understandable. A lot of these union leadership, they either start to feel cushy in their jobs and start selling out their workers, or it's just sometimes union leadership is captured by the government elite, by the ruling elite, by the corporate elite, etc. Okay, let me get to this possibly last story. And it would be amazing if a bunch of you would consider joining up at leecamp.net, my locals page. You get tons of free and extra stuff there. You get my ebooks, both of them. You get my comedy special, Laughing All the Way to the Shitstorm, the Zoom comedy special. You get a lot for signing up over at leecamp.net. And you got to scroll down to become a subscriber. And it would be amazing if all of you who do not want to actually donate, but you'd like to still support the show for free, go to leecamp.net and click Become a Member, which is the free version. Okay. So Venezuela, apparently Blackwater, even though they're no longer called Blackwater, is threatening to invade Venezuela in the next 3 days. This is from Eric Prince, who's the Blackwater founder. He behaves like a true lunatic in creating these mercenary forces that then massacre people. And he just never gets enough of it. He never gets tired of it. He's rich as hell, rich as God, and he doesn't care. He still wants to go around, harming and killing people with his mercenary forces. But Blackwater founder threatens Maduro and says September 16th will change history. So he's got a countdown clock on his website, on a new website that he's created. And he says, in a very short time, you will be able to witness and be a protagonist of the movement that will carry out the will of Venezuelan people. Of course, it's not the will of Venezuelan people. Maduro won the election. They have more accountable elections than we do here in the United States. And if you look at the actual numbers who came out for the marches, the number of people who came out for pro-Maduro marches, far larger than the number of people who come out for the let's bring U.S. privatization into Venezuela marches. And here is the former founder of Blackwater saying that on September 16th, we're going to attack Venezuela. I have no idea what he has planned. Maybe it's just, as with Juan Guaido, it might be one of these things where they just give a date and they just hope that by giving a date, it makes it happen, which Juan Guaido did multiple times. He said, tomorrow we're taking over Venezuela, even though he was not president and never received a vote. And inevitably, what actually ended up happening was he had 7 guys and a donkey behind him. And he was like, we're doing it. It was truly sad. It was sad for the U.S. empire. Really was not our best day. The times we tried to coup Venezuela with Georgetown frat boy Juan Guaido. He actually did go to Georgetown, by the way, in case you were wondering. But so how is Eric Prince's whole we're going to invade Venezuela going so far? Well, the U.S.-backed presidential candidate who claimed he won when he didn't has fled Venezuela. So it does not seem that it's going that great right now. And here's the thing, when you say U.S. backed, it doesn't just mean that the U.S. thinks he'd be better than Maduro. It means that he and several members of the opposition have called for the U.S. to invade Venezuela. They want the U.S. empire to invade their country, even though if you look at the countries the U.S. empire has invaded, it results in dictators, death of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, just destroyed economies, everybody struggling, privatization so that all the resources get shipped overseas to billionaires. It's just a shit show. And so someone doesn't stand for your country if they're saying, please invade and privatize us. Please invade and steal everything we have in this nation. Please do that. That'd be amazing. That would be so amazeballs. But anyway, he has fled Venezuela because he tried to create a coup, basically. And now he's a little bit worried that might not be good for him. And I will close out with this amazing clip of Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller, former aide to Donald Trump. He's a true, look at his eyes. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see going on in Stephen Miller's eyes when you watch this clip. And he was asked by a Venezuelan journalist to verify the crime stats that he was spouting. Now, it's kind of crazy what he's saying, so I just want to clarify before we get going. He says that crime has gone way down in Venezuela because Venezuela has sent all of their criminals to the United States. The Venezuelan reporter who's clearly anti-Maduro. So this is not a pro-Maduro journalist, but he's anti-Maduro, but he just says to Stephen Miller, why do you believe these crime has gone down stats in Venezuela? Where are you getting them? Where are you getting crime has gone down stats in Venezuela? And Stephen Miller melts the F down, totally loses it. All right. I just wanted to, the only reason I clarified all that is because it's kind of confusing what's being done here.
All these,
Day one.
all these criminal migrants that have been flooded in the country are going to be the first to get thrown out of here. I mean, you've seen case after case, these heartbreaking tragedies. Those ones are going to get found and deported first. And look at this Venezuelan gang. You have a Venezuelan gang that is taking over entire apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado.
Now, I assume that's not the Maduro stats, but I assume that's just fake. They just make this shit up, like eating the cats and dogs. But anyway.
And that's responsible, by the way, for some of the most heinous crimes that have happened all over the United States. The crime rate in Venezuela is down, I believe, a little bit over 60% over the last several years.
Are you trusting the official figures from the Venezuelan dictatorship?
Let's put it this way. If you're a dictator of a poor country with a high crime rate, wouldn't you send your criminals to our open border?
That wasn't my question. Are you
But
trusting the
my-
figures
Those
of the
are Maduro
dictatorships?
numbers.
Those are Maduro numbers.
Believing Maduro numbers.
I am believing that it is in the interest of a criminal dictator to let his criminals out of their jails and come to our
Do
country.
you have numbers, real numbers, not
I have
dictatorship numbers?
The Venezuelan gangs that
I'm gonna keep playing it, but I love that these are two anti-Maduro propagandists, Stephen Miller and this reporter, both anti-Maduro propagandists. Yet this one sticking point drives him loony.
you've seen the CCTV footage. I have a question. Who do you think? Answer me
My
this.
family is from Venezuela.
Yes.
I know very well the situation of Caracas and many other
Right,
cities.
tell me, who were the people with the high-powered rifles in the hallway of that apartment building? Who were they?
They were gangsters from Venezuela.
No American
But
community.
I was asking to you about figures, numbers,
What I'm saying
facts.
to you is the facts are the dead bodies. The facts are
You said that Caracas has a
facts are-
lowest crime
the
rate
facts
than the
are-
USA.
the facts are the mutilated bodies. The facts are the people in the morgues that are dead.
I was asking you about Caracas and the numbers in Caracas. Are you trusting the numbers of the dictatorship
I
to
am
state
trusting
what
the fact that Kamala Harris is
Why are you
letting
yelling?
illegal immigrants into this country who are raping and murdering children.
I had been very
Do you
respectful.
know-
Why are
do
you yelling?
Do you know who Jocelyn Nungri is? Do you know who she is?
Do you know how
Tell me
many
who she is.
people
Who is
is
she?
experiencing
Who is she?
violence in Caracas?
Who is she?
Can I just also point out that the right wing loves to find anecdotal events like, oh, this one woman was murdered and act like it's representative of whatever racist talking points they've got. I don't know the name. Whoever that woman was, he just said could be a real story that someone was murdered, might be a fake story that they made up. Either way, it's an anecdotal, like this one woman. You notice they're not giving out the names of all the people killed in America by police. They're not yelling those names. They just find the anecdotal thing that fits their story and then pretend it matters. But he continues to lose it. This isn't done.
Who is Laken Riley?
Why are
Who
you
is
yelling
she?
again?
Because I'm yelling because children are being raped and murdered.
I was just
by
asking for
illegal
figures,
immigrants.
and you have not
Children
replied
are
to me
being
about
raped
those
and
figures.
murdered. Do you know who Kayla
Do
Hamilton
you
is?
trust the numbers of
Do you know
Nicolas
her story?
Maduro? I'm asking
I
again.
trust a ruthless dictator will empty his prisons and send their criminals to our
So
country.
you trust his
The
numbers?
the most dangerous gang in Venezuela is
You
now
trust
occupying
Nicolas
apartment
Maduro?
buildings. I trust that he does not want his criminals to be.
So you believe in his numbers?
I believe he's sending his criminals to our country.
And do
Do
you
you
think
not-
that the crime rate in
Do you not
Venezuela
be-
have
but do you
decreased?
not believe the law enforcement reports of Venezuelan gangs in this country?
I was asking for
Are
the Venezuelan government
are
figures,
Venezuelan
not
gangs
the
in this
figures
country or
here.
not? Are Venezuelan gangs in this country or not? Yeah.
I don't know if I can do the whole I don't know if I can do the whole thing. Let's jump to here.
Tell you again that border patrol agents are encountering
Do you
thousands
trust
of gang members.
Maduro numbers?
I trust the border agents in our country,
And
I
I am
hope
not
that you
saying that
have the
Caracas has a
fundamental-
lower crime rate.
Children are dead, and you are wasting my time.
No, I am not wasting
Children
your
are being
time.
raped.
I'm
Do
asking
you
for
have
facts
any
as a
remorse
journalist.
do you have any remorse for the dead children? Do you care at all about the dead children?
Absolutely.
Then that's what I want to leave you with: is that Donald Trump
I
will
was-
And these are two propagandists. Like just and he's just losing his goddamn mind. Do you care about the children?
besieged by gang violence.
So you
where
don't have
public
figures.
schools that are being overtaken by migrant gangs. You have MS-13 that is brutalizing children. You have Kayla Hamilton, who was a 20-year-old autistic girl who was raped and murdered.
He's just out of his mind. By the way, you know, MS-13 used to be, it was like the main Republican talking point. They just, it's like the main Republican, it was MS-13, which is also not Venezuelan. But it used to be the main Republican talking point. I don't know about you. I literally never saw MS-13 written everywhere, like anywhere, like spray painted. I never saw a single, like, I get I'm not hanging out in the areas where, you know, gang activity might be most common, but I never saw a spray paint that actually said MS-13. And there was some, it was a while back article about how, yeah, MS-13 exists or existed, but it's like this tiny number of people and they act like it's taking over the country. And Anyway, it's good to see him melt. It's good for him to just display how unhinged he is, how easily triggered he is. It's just a lot of fun. A lot of fun to see that from Stephen Miller. Real quick before I wrap up, let's see what we got over in the comments section. Let's see. Robbie also pointed out MS-13 is not Venezuelan. Ray Bob says they don't give the names of all the people in Venezuela killed by U.S. sanctions. Yeah, that would take a while. That'd be a long telecast to list all the people killed by U.S. sanctions, which the UN Rapporteur says is over 100,000 people now. Let's see. Firepower says everyone is a dictator except the dictator. Exactly. The U.S. isn't a dictator, right? Except that we have two parties that are actually one party, and they're the only ones you're allowed to vote for, and they'll always be in power, apparently, because of the amount of money it takes to run. And so, therefore, you have essentially a dictator with a rotating face. Just take one mask, put on another one. Same shit, same fascist state, same bullshit, and same policies. And but that's not a dictator. That's not the largest prison state in the world. That's not a dictator. Let's see. Going back to some of the Boeing. By the way, again, thank you to those of you who donated in the super chats. You guys are all awesome. And I will be back. I do these live streams Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Someone asked about government secrets, whether we have a new government secrets. And in case you didn't hear us say it on the show, government secrets is now only twice a month. So we were off this week. We will be doing it again next week. So if you like the Government Secrets podcast, don't fear. It hasn't gone away. It's just twice a month. And I do have two other podcasts, Common Censored, which is me and Eleanor, and the Lee Camp Show on Spotify, which is my show, as well as it's also called Moment of Clarity on other platforms. Robbie wants me to do it Saturday. Really, Robbie? I don't do enough here. Come on, man. I'm trying. Is it? I don't know. If there were, I should have a vote sometimes. If there were like loads and loads of votes for a Saturday, maybe I'd do one sometimes, but it is tougher to do on weekends. Paco wants to know when I'm coming in New York City. Man, the live touring thing has just not been happening for me recently. I'm sorry. Maybe once I don't have a little kid and various other factors. The suppression is also a huge factor where like they've made it nearly impossible for me to let people in cities know that I'm coming to perform. So it makes it very hard to have tickets. And anyway, to sell tickets. And so, yeah, there's a lot of issues with the live touring. Thank you. Maria says, hardest working comedian. I'm the hardest working comedian in show business. Okay. I will be back Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And keep fighting.